This true crime story is about the disappearance of Maya Millete and the murder charge against her husband, Larry Millete. It was a marriage that started young, built over years with 3 kids and a home in a sunny San Diego suburb, only to fracture quietly under pressures that built like a storm cloud no one else could see. One January evening in 2021, a wife and mom walks through her front door after work, and that's the last confirmed sighting of her. What follows is a trail of digital desperation, controlling patterns, and a husband who insists he's innocent while the evidence points to something far more calculated. I'm John Cordray, a licensed professional counselor who spent years helping people navigate relationship trauma and the dark corners of the mind. Though I'll admit, after cases like this, I sometimes question why I just stick to lighter topics like couples communication skills, instead of unpacking why someone might cross into the unthinkable. If you're getting value from these deep psychological breakdowns, make sure you sign up for my newsletter, The Mental Freedom. Grab the link in the description and pin comment. It's free and it's where I share extra insights on protecting your mental space, case updates, and tips that actually help in real life. No courtroom required. And if you're an overthinker, this newsletter is just for you. Another case, another clinical file. Yes! These stories pull us in because they start with ordinary relationships that slowly twist into something unrecognizable. And the psychology behind that shift is what keeps us watching and listening. In Larry Millete's case, the patterns investigators uncovered suggest a man gripped by intense fear of losing his family structure, escalating from surveillance and emotional pressure to something lethal when Maya made clear she was done. These are my professional speculations based on reported behaviors from court records, witnesses' accounts, and digital evidence. It's not a formal diagnosis since I've never evaluated him, but they help explain the motive. Not random violence, but a panic attempt to stop an abandonment he couldn't tolerate. The trouble reportedly started ramping up in late 2020 when Maya began voicing exhaustion from what she called mental and emotional abuse in private messages to friends. She felt watched, restricted, unable to breathe freely in her own home. Larry grew increasingly fixated on a possible affair, which fed into jealous monitoring and controlling actions that limited her independence. This fits coercive control dynamics, where one partner uses isolation, constant checking, and intimidation to keep power. When Maya decided on divorce and started planning her exit, that control faced a direct threat, and the fear of permanent loss kicked into overdrive. From a psychological standpoint, this kind of escalation often ties back to insecure attachment, specifically anxious or fearful avoidance styles, where the instability or rejection experiences create a core terror of being left alone. Any sign of a partner pulling away registers as catastrophic, triggering clinging jealousy, possessiveness, or even worse. Larry's background includes a juvenile record for assault tied to gang activity before he relocated to Hawaii, though details stay very sparse. Layer that into long marriage with kids and rejection can feel like total erasure. The motive prosecutors emphasize, halting the divorce at all cost, points to this. The act wasn't about hatred in the classic sense, but about desperately preserving the attachment bond, even if it meant destroying the person inside it. As Maya continued to distance herself, Larry turned to online spellcasters for help. Messages started with pleas for her to fall back in love, to recommit, to see him as the right choice again. But as she kept moving toward separation, the request turned darker, asking for spells to make her sick, break her bones so she would stay home, suffer accidents, or even face harm that would force dependency. Over 1,700 messages went out. shifting from reconciliation fantasies to incapacitation wishes. This progression into magical thinking under mounting stress shows how rational coping crumbles when someone feels powerless. When real options vanish, people latch onto fantasy control as a defense against helplessness, but it reveals decompensation. The twist is that these digital cries for supernatural intervention became the most damning trail left behind, turning private desperation into public evidence. The night of January 7, 2021 adds layers to the picture. Maya arrives home around 5 p.m. Neighbors hear loud bangs around 9:57 p.m., 9 or so in quick succession, and the next morning, surveillance catches Larry maneuvering his vehicle to obscure the cargo area before heading out for over 11 hours. Phone left behind. Youngest child with him while the older two stayed home alone. He returns later and Maya is gone. These steps suggest premeditation aimed at avoiding scrutiny, yet they left obvious holes. The approach depended on an impressive level of faith that forensic wouldn't catch up, or that timing would align perfectly. Classic overconfidence where perceived cleverness far outpaces actual stealth. Humans keep showing remarkable ingenuity in rationalizing inconvenient facts, but the gap between self-viewed smarts and real-world detectability shows up time and time again. This dynamic of abandonment panic driving lethal control mirrors other domestic tragedies. Look at the Scott Peterson case. I'm sure you know that one. Convicted in 2004 for murdering his pregnant wife Lacey and their unborn son after she vanished on Christmas Eve of 2002. Peterson carried on with an affair with Amber while maintaining a calm public facade, lying effortlessly about his whereabouts and intentions. Prosecutors tied the motive to his desire to escape fatherhood and marital commitment, fueled by the affair and a wish for freedom without the mess of divorce. Like Larry, Scott faced impending life changes, new responsibility, potential loss of the status quo, and responded with elimination rather than negotiation. Both men showed composure amid suspicion, with affairs or suspected betrayals amplifying entitlement to dictate the relationship's end on their terms. The parallel lies in how attachment wounds or entitlement distort reality. Rejection becomes intolerable, so preventing it overrides everything, including morality. Scott's case ended in confession-like inconsistencies and body recovery. Larry's lingers in no-body limbo, but the psychological driver, desperate avoidance of abandonment, feels strikingly similar. Another echo comes through in the way control erodes into harm when challenged. In cases like Chris Watts, you probably know that one too, who in 2018 killed his pregnant wife, Shannon, and her daughters after she planned to leave amid his own affair and mounting pressures. The pattern repeats. Initial charm-masking possessiveness, then panic when the family unit threatened to dissolve. Watts fabricated stories and disposed of the remains in a calculated but flawed way, driven by a need to erase the obstacle to his new life. Larry's alleged shift to spellcasters for harm rather than direct confrontation suggests a similar internal conflict, wanting the problem gone without fully owning the violence. Yet the digital record made denial harder for him. These comparisons highlight a common thread. When insecure attachment collides with entitlement or fear of loss, the mind can justify extreme measures to cling to the familiar, even fatality. The no-body element keeps this case haunting after more than 5 years. Prosecutors lean on motive from the crumbling marriage, obsession over a suspected affair, reported choking incidents friends described, coercive patterns Maya confided, and those spellcaster messages evolving from love spells to harm requests. A competency evaluation in 2022 addressed defense concerns, but the judge found Larry fit to stand trial. As of March 2026, the trial sits scheduled for May 11, 2026, another delay granted in early 2026 despite family pleas after multiple postponements for attorney changes, preparation needs, and other logistics. Jury selection from nearly 300 potentials is set for late April, and marriage therapy records were ordered released to prosecutors earlier this year, adding potential insight into the relational strain. No body has surfaced, so this case rests on circumstantial strength, but the psychological buildup here, from control to desperation to alleged action, ties the pieces together in a way that's hard to ignore. If unpacking these layers of attachment terror, coercive escalation, and magical thinking under pressure gave you that clear aha on how fear can warp decisions, hit subscribe so we don't miss the next one. I'd hate to sit here profiling my own late night research habits in an empty comment section. Subscribe and let's keep decoding these minds together. No couch session needed, I promise. Let's wrap up with the key mental health indicators that I covered. Again, these are my speculations drawn from reported patterns, not a diagnosis, at least not from me. Coercive control, ongoing behaviors to dominate a partner through monitoring, isolation, and threats, often intensifying when independence is asserted. Anxious attachment, intense fear of abandonment from earlier experiences, sparking jealousy, clinginess, and extreme responses to separation threats. Magical thinking, turning to irrational or superstitious beliefs like spellcasting for control when real solutions feel out of reach, signaling stress overload. Homicidal ideation, fantasies or expressed thoughts of causing death or serious harm, here surfacing in messages as marital collapse accelerated. Decompensation, a psychological breakdown under overwhelming stress, where defenses fail and distorted thinking leads to harmful planning or action. These cases are so familiar, and we see repeated patterns in these, whether it's Scott Peterson or Chris Watts or here with Larry. It's amazing to me that it's almost like they took a chapter out of the playbook. They're very similar in so many ways. And their thinking is distorted or overthinking. They fall into thinking traps and they start to believe this false narrative that leads down a very lethal path. And I believe that's what's happened here. So this is an interesting case. It's not over yet. We have more trial dates and probably more information that's going to come out. So what did you think about this case? Were there any striking elements of the psychological red flags? Did you see the connection between this case or with Scott Peterson or with Chris Watts? Do you see that? Do you see other things that maybe I didn't mention? I'd love to hear that in the comments. And again, if you are an overthinker, sign up for my newsletter in the link in the description here. Thank you so much, friends, for watching. That's all for today, and that closes this clinical file. Until next time, look a little deeper, stay curious, and stay safe. I'll be over here analyzing my coffee choices until the next time.